All right, welcome to the Wheel Reads YouTube. We are doing something different today. This is going to be the first time we've done one of these videos, and we are going to have guests on to talk about the Twitter handle at fun_random_poll, which is where I run random brackets. And our next bracket that we're running is actually favorite fantasy TV show. So in order to get a better idea about that, of course, I run the Wheel Reads, which is just a Wheel of Time, but that doesn't cover all different types of fantasy. So I reached out to a podcast that does cover lots of fantasy and said, hey, will you guys come on, be the experts on this? Obviously they talk about books more than TV shows, but I'm sure they can lend their expertise in this as well. So I want to introduce them. We have Fantasy for the Ages, both Jim and Zach here. So guys, go take it away. Introduce yourselves. Tell them about your podcast.
All right. Well, thanks, Alan. It's great to be here. And our podcast is, as you said, Fantasy for the Ages. We do a podcast specifically because I'm the dad, Zach is the son. We share a real passion for fantasy fiction and in all of its formats. So books, movies, TVs. I like to think I raised my son right. And so we definitely love
watching Star Wars, Star Trek, and even Lord of the Rings being one of the earliest favorite movies I've seen.
And we love to yak about this stuff. We love to share it together. So now we podcast about it. Our podcast focuses on a book series at a time. And we decided to start with an easy one, a short one, The Wheel of Time. So we're working our way through the Wheel of Time for our main focus. Every week we drop a new episode. We're into the Great Hunt right now and just moving along. But then we also do midweek specials that are on all sorts of things related to fantasy fiction. In fact, just earlier today, we recorded an episode that's very appropriate to what we're going to talk about today. We were discussing what sorts of movies and TV shows we want to see based on fantasy fiction. Either things that have never come to the screen, or ones that came, but we still cringe when we think about them, and we need to see them done better. So we're kind of living in what we're going to talk about with the poll a bit here today, for sure. And
absolutely.
I love talking about all of these things. I've been into fantasy fiction since I was a teenager. And Zach, as he said, since he was a baby.
Basically birth.
Good deal. So besides Lord of the Rings or Wheel of Time, what is you guys' favorite fantasy book series ever? Yeah. If you had to pick one book series.
There's so many. It's hard. It's hard. I definitely enjoy, both sci-fi and fantasy. So the Dune saga, something I definitely enjoy. So many books to it. That's a good one. Zach, what's one that jumps up for you?
Yeah, I just finished the first trilogy of Mistborn.
Okay.
And
yeah, I've read it recently too.
It ranks pretty high on my list after just reading it.
Right.
It holds up.
Yeah, it's fun.
And Brandon Sanderson, he's putting out so much good stuff now.
Well, he's a machine. He just keeps on cranking out books like you wouldn't believe. But it is good. It's all good quality. Without further ado, let me just go and quickly talk about also some of the upcoming polls that we have coming up besides the Fantasy TV's poll, which is the next one. After that, we will be running best our favorite Disney movie, both animated and non-animated. Disney does have a lot that they make that's non-animated as well. So things like Homeward Bound, where you have talking dogs and cats and things like that. So we'll get into that when we get to that poll. After that, we're going to run best rock song of all time. So all decades, rock and roll songs. It's going to be fun. Right now, we just finished up pop songs. So
I voted for some of those.
Yeah. And then after that, because we're going to go right into the summer there, and by fan choice, we did a couple of polls on what you wanted to see next. Favorite cocktail. So we're going to start talking a little about liquor going into summer and what, hopefully if you're going to the beach and things like that, what to drink. I don't know. It's up to you guys. If but, that was an interesting one. There's definitely some interesting names for cocktails. So yeah, those are the next three after that, and then maybe we'll get into music again or movies or TV. We'll see. I haven't decided yet.
Well, I definitely enjoy the cocktails. Every one of our episodes, I've got a special drink that I introduce at the beginning, and on our Instagram I put out the recipes. So cocktails,
Nice.
there you go.
All right.
Yeah.
Good deal.
And to
Yes.
be honest, I probably enjoy the cocktails more than enjoy the experience of making the cocktails.
Well, sure. I used to be a bartender, so you kind of get sick of making some of those cocktails. Anything with a blender, pretty much at a crowded bar, is like the most. Just anything. If you're 19, 20 years old, you're about to turn 21, have your first bar going experience, and you're at a crowded bar, just don't order anything that requires a blender, because it's the most annoying thing for a bartender when you have like 10 deep at a bar and everybody's screaming for orders. Rum and Coke, gin and tonic, great choices. I want a frozen daiquiri with this. I saw a bartender once take the blender and smash against the wall and said the blender's broken. Sorry, what else do you want? Just it's that's the worst.
Poor guy.
Yeah, those are the absolute worst. So so let's talk about the fantasy TV series poll and how I created it. Basically went on to use IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes to compile the list of things that were considered fantasy TV. Now, it's going to include a lot of things that might be surprises. It includes classic fantasy, like your Game of Thrones and things like that. Also, comic book type TV shows, and maybe even like vampire, werewolf, monster type shows as well, because quite frankly, Hollywood classifies that as fantasy. So for the sake of this poll, it's fantasy. Mm-hmm. So with that being said, I showed you guys the whole list of all 128 shows. What's your initial thoughts?
Oh, let me jump in with the first one. Game of Thrones. Obviously, are we allowed to talk about where these things were ranked?
Sure.
Is that okay?
Yeah, so Game of Thrones is the number one seed. And the way I did my seeding was based on Rotten Tomatoes. Being that put the critic score and the viewer score, combine the two, whoever the highest, that's the number one seed.
It makes sense that Game of Thrones is number one. It's been a game changer for what can come to the screen now. Zach and I were talking earlier. You combine Game of Thrones and Harry Potter and what they did to move the genre forward to be something marketable and able to be there. And we owe them some debt. But that said, Game of Thrones should not win your poll, and I'm just gonna put that out there.
Sure.
It's yes, I loved Game of Thrones. I mean, there's season 8. Enough said, okay, but there's also the issues of, you've got producers saying, hey, let's throw some more nudity in because it sells. Sure. Or let's go a little gratuitous with the violence because it sells. It kind of hurts it a little bit, but it's still a great show. I just don't think it deserves to win. So, number one, okay, don't let it win, people. Don't let it win.
Sure. Yeah. And then our number 2 seed was Stranger Things. That's a Netflix show. Very popular right now. And does have that magic, especially with 11. I'm sorry, not trying to spoil too much. If you haven't seen it yet, go check it out. I'm not going to say what she does, but there is a fantasy magical element to it.
Yeah, it's got that authentic 80s nostalgia that's going for it. That's done really well. And
it definitely rides the line between sci-fi and fantasy in a way that it works very well. And I think it benefits from having really good child actors, which isn't something we see all the time.
Yeah. And a really creative storyline, too. Although I think it starts to weaken as we move through the seasons.
Sure. And then number 3, 4, and 5. Obviously, some of them are a little bit strange being here, but like you have Supernatural, and then Outlander and Lost, of course, which is ABC.
To speak about Supernatural for a moment, it's a tough one to have here. I loved Supernatural, but it probably should have ended after season 5.
And that's where it was originally intended.
Right. To go for, I think it was 15 seasons.
Right.
That is correct.
It went on forever.
It was just a lot of fun, but the story starts to suffer. But people loved the 2 main stars. So it's going to get a lot of votes, and it's worthy. I mean, I enjoy it.
Sure.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I watched Supernatural start to finish on and off. It only recently, this year, ended. And really, when it comes down to it, the final 10 seasons were fan driven.
I can't speak to Outlander. I honestly haven't watched it.
But your wife can.
Oh, yes. But even she has started to go, with Outlander.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I want to speak about Lost.
Yeah,
Now,
that was a surprising one, too, to be on the list. Now, obviously, it does have weird elements.
Yeah.
Could call it sci-fi-ish, could call it fantasy. I don't know. The smoke monster.
It's a controversial series for sure. I mean, people loved Lost. I loved Lost. It suffered from a writer's strike partway through the series, and then it had a rush to the end. I think what Lost suffers from is writers who came up with so many great storylines and payoff promises that they couldn't deliver on.
Yep.
So it kind of went at the end.
Exactly.
But if people just vote on, did they love the intrigue? Did they love the smoke monster? Did they love the mystery? It could do very well in the poll.
Especially if we're looking at, say, Lost there. A little bit controversial for me.
Sure.
I had a really hard time with it. I didn't really like it that much.
Yeah.
Granted, I was a bit younger still at the time when it first came out.
Sure.
But it didn't keep me interested.
Yeah, I understand that. But of course, I watched it when I was in my 20s and watched it every single week. It was one of those things where I was definitely hooked by Lost until the end, and then I was disappointed. We'll get into that. Similar to Game of Thrones, we have a lot of top seeds that have disappointing endings. So, a reoccurring theme going on here. So one thing I want to talk about too as well is surprises for you guys. Maybe surprises that made the list, maybe surprises that were seated so low, or obviously we talked about some of these things being seated so high. And then maybe surprises for omissions, like things that you thought would definitely be on this list that just didn't even cut the top, rankings on Rotten Tomatoes or IMDb, so they didn't even make it. So go ahead, go away with your.
My dad feels passionately about one of these. One that he felt was seated much too low.
Okay.
And while he hasn't finished what's been released, I have. And I have a little bit different opinion from him, and that's Van Helsing.
Oh, sure. Okay.
98? Seriously?
Yeah, I've not
he
watched
and I
that series
were
yet,
talking
so.
a little bit earlier about why it would be. Yeah. I think it's very entertaining. It does suffer from some things. I know my dad pointed out Game of Thrones has a lot of just gratuitous violence for the sake of gratuitous violence. And, Van Helsing has the same thing. So
Sure.
leave it there. I also find, while I enjoy it, each season feels like they come up with a plot during each season. They don't plan it.
Sure.
So I think it deserves to be a little lower down. But maybe not quite that far.
Now, we're talking about a poll, so people are voting based on just what do they like, who do they like. I think Van Helsing could be a dark horse here because it does feature actress Jennifer Chang Garcia, who is playing a prominent role in Wheel of Time on Amazon that's in development. So she's playing Liana, or Liane, or whoever you want to call her. And I think that might get it a little bump in votes. So I'm pulling for Van Helsing.
Yeah.
I'm still saying you have to see what happens with that character in that show before you really enjoy it, though.
Because I haven't finished. You're right.
Sure. Any other surprises that you saw on here, or anything else that?
Constantine. It only made it one season, but to be 79, I thought that was a great show. It should have gone on more than one season.
Sure.
I'm thankful that the character John Constantine has come back in the DC universe. So if you watch Arrow, The Flash, Legends of Tomorrow, he's still around now.
Sure.
And so that might get it some more votes. I don't know.
Right.
The other one that was so low, and I went, whoa, the Dresden Files. Again, a show that only made it one season, but it's such great source material, and it really was done well. So
Sure.
it ought to be more than 108. Let's
Yeah,
get
and
it some votes.
And I think a lot of times too, when you're looking at these Rotten Tomato rankings, if they weren't as popular of a series, or they haven't become a cult following yet. So the reason why I say that is because you look at something like a Firefly or Jericho, or one of those type of shows where, if you had asked the year after it was canceled, no one had ever heard of those shows. Fast forward 10, 20 years, everyone wants them to come back. They're never going to come back, but it's one of those things where now more and more people know about these shows. So that also could affect the ratings because the only people that are reviewing it are people that I don't know people that review Rotten Tomatoes. I mean, obviously, it could just be like random people like, oh, I've never heard of that. Click no. Like, and you get a bunch of votes for it's Rotten.
I think that raises a great point as to why Supernatural gets so high, just because it was on so long.
Yes.
Yeah, and
I think a lot of those high-seeded shows were just long.
Right. Either long or they were popular at whatever time. So even if they're popular at one point of their run, then obviously they got a lot of critic response and viewer response, and those don't go away. So it takes a lot more negative to bring down those scores. So it definitely affects the seeding, and you'll have what we call the new slant versus old slant. So anything that's new will have a higher slant towards being higher rated than something that's been around for a longer time because it has,
like WandaVision.
Sure. Yeah.
There's no way it should be so high. It's just
it just
new
came out. Yeah.
and very
It's
popular.
new. And that's like I said, it's that popularity and new, and everybody's voting yes right now. The second season could be horrible. I'm not saying it will be, but it could be. And as time goes on, that might not stay as high on the on the list. So yeah.
I had 2 shows that I noted that I put on a list that's just called No. Just No. that I'd love to share here.
Sure.
One of them is simply at number 95 in your poll, The Wizards of Waverly Place.
Okay.
What's wrong with Disney?
People were entertained by it, but it's 3 ahead of Van Helsing. So again, no. Just
I
no.
still remember Harper's Hat song word for word.
It was popular. I mean, people
The
liked
other
it.
one that falls into this, and this comes down to just some lasting hate I have for a series. If anyone listens to our podcast, you'll get this. The Shannara Chronicles at number 66. It's
have to add it,
solidly
though.
fantasy, but all of these things are an
vehemently hate
adaptation. They're going to go away from the source material, but this took the source material, it spit on it, it kicked it in the dirt a little. It was just bad.
It
So
put it in a blender at a bar that doesn't want to be
MTV'd
used.
it.
nice.
Yeah, they MTV'd it. That's what they did. So. But so Shannara definitely is those your only 2 on there? Shannara and the Wizards of Waverly
Those
Place?
are my 2 with the just no. If I've done anything good in this video, no one votes for the Shannara Chronicles.
I think that's a little
There might be
harsh.
some fans out there. I mean, there might be some
I know
people that actually
there are.
loved it.
They're out there.
So Zach, you had said that you're surprised by that one was on here. So
Yes. There was the one that made it. I don't remember what seed it is off the top of my head, but
Yeah, I don't-
it's questionable as to whether it counts as a TV show. It is a
sure,
show.
it's a show,
and that was Critical Role.
and it's on
It's a
IMDb.
live action, live streamed, real play D&D show that I tune into almost weekly.
Well, I mean,
Sometimes I have times I can't make it, but I really enjoy it. And it is definitely fantasy. They're playing
sure.
Dungeons and Dragons, and it's a bunch of nerdy voice actors doing it.
sure.
And I think it is absolutely fitting in this
Sure.
competition, and maybe even should be higher up in the ratings. But I didn't expect to see it, and it made me really
Sure.
happy to see.
Yeah, I went back and forth on adding Critical Role to it. I saw that because it's on IMDb, it's on Rotten Tomatoes, and then the one deciding factor was a couple weeks ago I went to the local Barnes and Noble, of all places, and I'm in the fantasy section, and they have an entire Critical Role section, and I was like,
Yeah.
okay, well I guess if it's that legit,
No,
make
they
it
have
put
a
it in the list.
whole bunch of published material.
Yeah, they have tons of published material, make
And
it
they
into-
are actually coming out. It would potentially make the list. It's not there yet. I think it's done by Amazon Prime, a animated TV show based on their first campaign.
Okay.
Huh.
So there you go. All right. So that's another surprising. So any underdogs or anything like that? Obviously, we talked about Van Helsing is going to smash through all the competition and win everything. But any other underdogs or
hoping.
anything like that? Something, higher ranked that you think is going to go the distance, that you're going to say, like, these are the shows that you think are going to. Obviously, you have popularity. You're going to run into a roadblock there. If it's a show no one's doesn't have a mass audience, it's going to be tough. But thoughts?
Yeah. A couple that come to mind for me. Witcher, of course, at number 8. It's already ranked pretty high, but I think that was a really strong showing in its first season. I
Sure.
think it could do very well in the poll. But then one that really clings to a big fan base, also kind of high already. Number 10, Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah.
I loved it. I watched all the way through it. It's pretty campy at times,
Sure.
but it's got a lot of fans. So
Yeah.
that could do very well.
Yeah, another sleeper in here is Merlin. If you've ever seen that, it's really campy, but it has a huge following.
I
yeah?
loved it so much.
Yeah, it
I've
is
got
campy.
number 35.
hurt me
I've
a
got it
little
on my
bit.
list as a good one.
Yeah,
The end definitely hurt just a little bit inside
Sure.
for me because I got so invested in it. But I went through a phase for a couple years where I was just really into almost every BBC show, Doctor Who, Merlin, Sherlock.
Sure.
It hit me.
I'd love to highlight number 27, Penny Dreadful.
yeah,
That was a really unique show, bringing horror and drama into a really well-delivered vehicle, sadly designed only to be one season.
right.
It was a great one season. It ended well, but you wanted more.
Sure.
And so I'd love to see, hey, that do strongly because it was
Yeah.
so well produced. I mean, great production value. They spared no expense on that piece.
Right. Well, I mean, a one-season show can win it all. We just did favorite HBO TV series, and Band of Brothers won,
Yeah.
which was designed for one season. It was a one-season show. Of course, it's hard to vote against Band of Brothers because it's a really good show. If you've ever watched Band of Brothers,
True.
It's very good.
Yeah.
So I mean,
Yeah.
just because it's a one-season show, I don't think to discount those. They can go the distance as well. Especially if it's not a canceled show, if it's
Right.
designed and wrapped up.
I'm intrigued to see how Winona Earp will do.
Yeah, they have a big
That's an
following,
interesting show. 4 seasons now. I don't know if they've got the 4th season out yet, but they are
not
doing
sure.
a 4th season, which is supposedly going to be the last season I saw. I've only watched the first 2 seasons so far, but it's great. I mean, again, horror, supernatural brought into the modern Western, in a
Yeah.
sense.
In a way that it works.
Yeah, it does work. It's
Sure.
again, it's engaging, it's entertaining, and it's down there at 39. It could
Yeah.
knock some
Could-
people
could.
out. Who knows?
Yeah, you never know. I mean, I do these seeds, and I'm always surprised by the shows that get knocked out. That I'd never, it's shows that I like that knocked out another show, but I'm like, that show has such a big following, so it's just one of those things that it happens. Same thing with the songs I'm doing right now. It's been very eye-opening and surprising.
I do think
Yeah.
I think there's one that's not on the list that I can think of that I wish was there. It fits more into the like sci-fi-ish category, but there's plenty enough on the list that fit similarly, and
Sure.
that's Eureka. I don't know
Okay.
if you've ever seen it.
Oh yeah.
I haven't
but-
seen
yeah.
it.
It
I've heard
was
of
a
it.
really endearing premise. I enjoyed it, and it does span at times things that are borderline fantasy, borderline science fiction, and
Sure.
sometimes just can't be fun.
Yeah.
And I think it deserves to be ahead of some of the things on the list.
Sure. Yeah, and
just
like I
not
said,
there.
maybe next time we'll get there. Of course, by the time I run this again, there will be new shows out. They're developing, for example, the Lord of the Rings show and the Wheel of Time show right now. So there'll be more fantasy shows.
Yep.
Also, I think Hulu and Netflix have been ramping up their fantasy productions. So who knows? If I ever run this poll again a year from now or 2 years from now, it might be a completely different list. So, and that might be in there, and something else might not be.
Well, clearly, a year or two down the road, the poll won't matter because Wheel of Time will have just taken it all.
Hopefully, we have our fingers crossed. I
I want that to be true, but who knows?
Sure, but yeah, I would love it to be true too. I
It's
can't
in
wait
good
to see-
hands. It's in good hands.
It is, and I can't wait to see the trailer. So I'm excited about that. So hopefully, knock on wood.
Next
soon.
month, please.
Yeah, it's next month, hopefully. There's been some leaks saying that, but they're not reliable. So we'll see. We'll see.
I have one show I'll toss out here still that I would give as the Crash and Burn Award.
Okay.
There's one show I don't think is going to go far at all that's rated fairly high, and that's
Okay.
number 14, The Good
Okay.
Place.
Okay.
My wife loves it. My daughter loves it. It's
I
entertaining,
love it.
but I don't think it hangs with the rest of that are anywhere near that in the rankings. I think
Yeah.
it goes out in the first round. Just
Okay.
I
saying.
think you suffer from not having seen it. Really.
Yeah, my wife and I watched a few episodes.
I'm just
I
on
think
the
we watched
record.
first season.
First
But, yeah.
round, one and done. Boom.
My wife loved it as well. I thought it was okay. It was cute. that's the way I'm gonna put it at. But yeah, we'll see.
It's worth the first round, at least. I
Sure.
think so.
Yeah, well, we'll see how far it goes. It has a following as well. There's people that love that show. So you never know.
Exactly.
And all it takes is just like one or two people to retweet these polls to the right fandom, and they just bulldoze the competition. So it happens.
Yeah. Now the irony is if it mathematically aligns with Van Helsing and it beats it.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. That's going to be the
You would
dagger.
deserve it,
That
truthfully.
would be wrong.
Yeah, that's and we'll see. Maybe that actually ends up happening. We got
Twisting.
or even worse, Shannara Chronicles somehow lines up, and I'm sorry, it's not.
No.
Make it so.
Find a way to make that happen. Yeah. So that's all I really had to ask you guys. Any final thoughts or anything else you guys want to add to this? I know you probably have a ton of notes. Are you guys excited to see this poll? I mean, I am. I think it's gonna be a fun one to run.
Yeah, truthfully, I'm just excited to see what kind of following you get on the poll within some of these, because
Sure.
it may turn into not a what do we think is the best, but rather what is the most well loved. And
Sure.
I think that's telling enough as it is.
I'm curious about two things. How many Norwegian bots will have show up for this poll? and Alan, what would be your, if you don't mind sharing, what would be your top 3 out of these?
My top 3. So some of them haven't finished yet, so it's hard to say with ones that haven't finished before. But ones that I absolutely love. I loved Magicians. I know the book was better, but I loved.
The book's better.
Magicians. I know, but I
Almost
loved,
always.
I love the TV show. Almost always, I love the TV show. So that's a big one for me. And then looking through this list, I think of other things I've seen. So a lot of them I haven't seen before, and haven't finished yet. So it's hard for me to opinionate on. So like, for example, Castle Rock that's on Hulu, which is going through all of Stephen King's sci-fi world around, around a lot of his shows, or a lot of his books. It's like a encompassing.
Yeah.
and brings in a lot of characters from I think it starts actually at Shawshank prison in the show, and someone's in a part of the prison in Shawshank and trying to get them out. It's really weird, but it's interesting and fun. It has a slight horror concept, but a lot more. It makes you think, and I've enjoyed that. I know a lot of people don't have Hulu, but it's been great. But like I said, I'm not up to date on it. So from what I've seen, I really like that one. That's a further down ranking one.
Yeah, I started it. I haven't finished it either, so I'm with you. I'm just not up to date.
Yeah, not up to date on it. But, so yeah, I mean, obviously some of the ones like Game of Thrones, I loved the first couple seasons of Game of Thrones. Things like that. So,
all right.
Magicians is the one that I am geek out about the most, I guess, probably. Out of all the ones on here that I just really enjoyed the show, that probably it probably doesn't have the strongest following. It's probably gonna get knocked out, but yeah, we'll see. I could throw Vampire Diaries in there.
Maybe unfortunate,
list, right?
Yeah, it is. To be fair, there's technically at least 3 in that universe there. The Vampire Diaries, the originals, and Legacies, all around there.
All on the list.
I watch them as guilty pleasures / just I enjoy it.
And I have not watched any of them.
They don't deserve to win. Not a single one of those deserves to win. But I loved them.
Watch, they're going to take it away. The CW bots are going to come in and just bulldoze the entire competition. So, so anyway, that's any final thoughts from you guys before we go ahead and sign off?
I've got nothing. Not anything too important, at least.
Yeah. No other thoughts other than, hey, if people like our thoughts on these things, we'll hope they come check our podcast out too.
Sure. And how can they find your podcast?
We are in all the usual places. If you look for Fantasy for the Ages on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Audible, any of the places that you can normally look for it. I've tried to put it all those spots. And we're all over social media too, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and a Discord server. So anywhere that they ought to find podcasts, they should find Fantasy for the Ages.
All right, good deal. And obviously come check us out. Vote for us at @fun_random_poll. Or check us out at our podcast, which is Anything the Wheel Reads. You'll find us anywhere. Also hit subscribe, like, comment away if there's a certain TV show that once we start the poll going, that you're like, hey, I wish this was here. Let me know. If we do run again, it might show up there. So other than that, happy voting, guys.